All right, let's get into it. Bryce Gelman here today talking about the NFLPA's report cards, the survey that they give to each one of their players. They fill out, send back in, they put it all together. We're going to talk about how this correlates to what the Giants and the Jets have been doing. For the Giants, same old, middle of the pack. Not many surprises for the Jets. Not looking good. We're also going to talk about some of the comments that Joe Schoen made. Don't want to repeat anything because it was on Tuesday, not really that newsworthy, but I want to talk about one thing that he mentioned because it's something that we discussed here on this YouTube channel a couple of months ago. Going to talk about that. We're going to start here with some of these Giants rankings and some of the ones that I think stand out to me the most. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the head coach ranking, which is Brian Daboll. And Brian Daboll ranked as an A-, which ranked 13th in the league. And, sometimes they'll include stats under it because it's a larger survey. There's multiple questions that they ask. So the players answer, one question at a time. So basically, they'll put it as part of their in-depth analysis or whatever it is. So one interesting stat here is that 100% of the players feel that Brian Daboll is efficient with their time, which ranks first overall in this ranking. So, something that we knew from the start was that Brian Daboll was a player's coach. There was a reason why he developed such a special chemistry with Josh Allen in Buffalo, and there's a reason why he eventually became the Giants head coach, because that repertoire that he's been able to build with his offensive and defensive players, specifically obviously on the offense. But this is an encouraging sign, especially, and again, I'm going to get into this a little bit later, but especially concerning what Pat Leonard had to say in his report a couple of months ago for the New York Daily News, which, if you missed it, basically said that there was major dissent between Brian Daboll and the rest of the coaching staff. Didn't really mention any dissent between Daboll and the players. So I guess that this is the other side of it, that Daboll could still be extremely hard to work with if you are a coach, on the coaching staff, on his coaching staff. But if you're a player, then maybe he gives you leeway. I don't understand that, because if you see him, if you're a player and you saw your head coach mistreating, let's say your defensive coordinator, which it apparently did happen, then I think the players would take note of that and wouldn't necessarily play into what Daboll has to say or trust him as much. So I think that this definitely takes into account some of what actually happened. And the other stuff could be a little bit, made up, convoluted, whatever you want to call it. But that is certainly an encouraging sign for the Giants, especially Brian Daboll as the coach of the year 2 years ago needs a bounce back year. This is a make or break year. We're going to continue to talk about that more and more as the offseason progresses. But yes, it is essential that Daboll is able to not only change the perception of himself to the fans, but to the media as well. If he wants to spin this in a positive, he's going to need to figure out what went on behind the scenes, the dissent that happened, and he's going to need to correct that going forward. If he's a little bit abusive to the staff, maybe he's got to, stop that and maybe, treat his staff with a little bit more respect. But that all remains to be seen. But this is certainly encouraging. All right. So the owner, Mara Tisch, B+, 14th overall. Team travel, B+, 4th overall. This was actually one of the Giants. It's the Giants' second highest rating. That supposedly these players think that they have enough room to travel. They have enough room on the flights, that their traveling situation is good. So good on John Mara and Steve Tisch, the owners of the Giants, for setting that up for them. Strength training, B+, 15th. Weight room, B, 18th overall. This is the number one rating. The training staff was given an A-, which ranked second in the NFL. And the players, and this is, again, one of these, side stats that's, in their rankings. The players gave head trainer Ronnie Barnes the second highest individual grade in the NFL. 96% of the players feel like they receive enough one-on-one treatment, first overall. If you look at what the Giants have been able to do, specifically with the defensive players, I think this is showing. I think that, considering this isn't made up. This isn't because they like the trainers, because they're actually getting something out of it. You look at what Dexter Lawrence has become, by far the best defensive tackle in the league. He's an absolute game wrecker in the front there. And he has done this. Listen, if you're a defensive tackle, you need to be strong. You need to be moving bodies out of the way. You need to be, destroying these blockers on the inside. And that's exactly what Dexter Lawrence has been able to do. Far and away, according to PFF, he's 2 points better than the next guy. The change in rating from the second guy to the fifth guy is significantly closer from Dexter Lawrence to the second guy, which is Aaron Donald. So good on the training staff. Good on, Ronnie Barnes for being the second highest individual grade in the NFL. That's another encouraging sign for these Giants. So next rating here is the training room, which is a B, 12th overall. If your training staff is that good, you're making the most with what you have. The Giants could improve that. Their training staff is only going to get even higher ratings, potentially be number one in the NFL. Locker room, C+, 17th overall. Nutritionist, dietitian was their worst rating with the C+ at a 27th overall, which is not ideal. It was like 64% of players feel like they had an individual diet plan. Maybe the Giants just aren't prioritizing, their third string center. That's got to be something that improves. I'm sure that Joe Schoen and John Mara and Steve Tisch are looking these numbers over, and they're going to make the changes they deem necessary. We know that, the owners certainly get a bad rap from time to time, but judging off of these ratings, they've done a good job at figuring out and targeting what didn't work the year before, fixed it for the year after. Food cafeteria, B, 8th. Treatment of facilities, C, at 15th overall. So there aren't that many surprises here. I mean, we know that MetLife Stadium, we know the training facility ranks towards the middle of the pack, which is kind of pathetic considering the fact that the stadium and the training facility, I don't know if I guess it was the same training facility as before, but the stadium is, at this point, 14, 15 years old. One of the worst stadiums in the NFL. It is a disaster to get to. I mean, New Jersey, I'm not complaining, but I feel for my Long Island brothers who've got to travel 2, potentially 3 hours to get to Giants games. And that's just the location. Now let's talk about the actual stadium. This is another story for another day. And I mean, technically, it kind of leads us into our next topic, which is discussing the Jets ratings, because it's not a good look. So let's get into these Jets ratings, starting with the treatment of facilities, just going down in order from what it was. D- at 25th overall. Food cafeteria, C- at 25th overall. Nutritionist / dietitian, B+ at 10th overall. Pretty solid. Locker room, C- at 21st. Training room, C- at 27th. It starts to get rough at this point. Training staff, C at 29th overall. That's terrible. Weight room, B-, 22nd overall. Strength coaches, B- at 25th overall. Team travel, C at 17th overall. Head coach, B, 24th. Ownership, B- at 20th overall. So what are my biggest takeaways here? It's the fact the locker room has a C- at 21st, but the Giants, the locker room is a C+ at 17th. It's the same locker room. I mean, they built it in the exact same stadium. There's 4 separate locker rooms in MetLife Stadium. One for the Giants, one for the Jets, and each one for whichever opposing team comes in to play them on that given week. So it's basically the exact same locker room. They built it using the same space. Giants, slightly better. Jets, slightly worse. 15-year-old stadium that they screwed up so bad that both teams hate the amount of locker room space. I mean, that's what you get when you share a stadium, when it should be that there's 2 locker rooms and that one locker room from the home team is big enough to combine both of the actual team locker rooms. It makes no sense. I think if I'm the Jets, if I'm Woody Johnson, I am hyperactive in terms of looking to where I can move my team. It makes no sense why these 2 teams and being valued in the top 20 in all sporting franchises have to share a stadium, specifically a stadium that everyone hates. It's the one thing Giants and Jets fans can actually agree on. It's the fact that MetLife Stadium sucks. It's not a good stadium. The concessions are mid. The viewing experience is mid. The facade, the outside of the stadium looks like a trash can. It's seriously one of the most overrated stadiums in the league, even when it came out, hosted the Super Bowl with the Seahawks and the Broncos. I mean, what else have they hosted? I cannot believe they're getting the World Cup in 2026, the finals. The only reason they are is because of the location. If it were anywhere else, if MetLife Stadium was built in Kansas City or Baltimore or anywhere else, it would get much more hate than it's currently getting. Or maybe it's getting more hate because it's in New York and people are just a little bit more harsh towards stuff like that. But it's earned. It's given. Giant Stadium was actually a pretty good stadium. It needed to be knocked down. It was from the 70s. It outlived its day. And in 2009, the Giants and the Jets needed a new stadium, but the Jets should have left. You could see that both the, I don't know. I'm rambling. I'm completely, but I think this is a pertinent and relevant issue for most fans. And again, the one thing the Giants and Jets fans can agree on: Jets need to figure it out. I mean, these rankings are pathetic. For a team based in New Jersey, New York, your facilities, the amenities the players get, whatever, need to be better. Simply put, the treatment facilities is pathetic. I mean, D- 25th. The training, this is the biggest issue, is the training staff being a C at 29th overall and the training room being a C- at 27th. You have a state-of-the-art facility in Florham Park, which is, not too far from me. I've been around there. I've actually been to the facility itself. It's nice. They've got plenty of fields. It's just, they're in a corporate area with major office buildings. What's the excuse? You built a state-of-the-art training facility and the players hate it. I don't know how you build on that. Like, I don't know how you make things better. I don't know how you make the players more satisfied with what you got when you have an area like that, when you got a training facility like that. The Jets have an issue on their hands, and it isn't just what they're going to do next year, what they're going to do with their offensive line. It's how they're going to fix this going forward. One thing I will say is this really doesn't mean much. Because if you look at the Chiefs rankings, I mean, they're abhorrent. Like, they are some of the worst ratings that I have ever seen from a team that is that successful. Chiefs are 3 times in the last 5 years Super Bowl champions. Back to back. And their owner, Clark Hunt, their stadium, their training, like, all of these ratings are terrible. It just helps when you have the best quarterback of this generation. So it doesn't really mean anything, but it certainly helps a team that doesn't have the quarterback that is Patrick Mahomes. Like that is head and shoulders more important than anything that you could throw out with training facilities, with practice area, with traveling, with it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's the product you put on the field. And the Chiefs ranked the best or near the top with Andy Reid. That's all that matters. That's all. You've got a great head coach and you've got the best quarterback of this generation. So, listen, if the Jets quarterback and the Jets head coach situation weren't the way they were, I'd turn a blind eye to this. I'd be like, okay, well, whatever. They'll be able to figure it out. But will they? With Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers at the helm? Robert Saleh looks like a complete fool from all these articles, everything that's been released recently. I mean, do you really trust Robert Saleh running your team? I mean, Hard Knocks kind of showed him to be this reclusive figure who kind of allows Aaron Rodgers to walk around and be the big man on campus. And that has just become even more true throughout these past few months. The way he handled the Zach Wilson situation was pathetic, was terrible. Zach Wilson was the best quarterback in the room. Joe Douglas should have went out and gotten a better backup quarterback. But Robert Saleh should have made the most of the situation. You got to continue to roll Zach Wilson out there. He should have been more on Aaron Rodgers for not reaching out to Zach Wilson, who apparently had no help from the veteran quarterback whatsoever after the injury, which, I mean, it was obvious that Aaron Rodgers was riding this high of being the quarterback of the New York Jets, being in New York after being in Green Bay for 15 plus years. He was riding that high. He was looking at it as like, all right, this is a layup of a season. Look at all these weapons that I have. Look at all these guys the Jets bent over backwards to bring in, like Allen Lazard, who did absolutely nothing when Rodgers went out. One of the worst contracts that I've seen, up there with Kenny Golladay from the Giants. There are so many things that were thrown Aaron Rodgers' way. Here's the franchise. Here's the keys to the facility in Florham Park. Here are the keys to MetLife Stadium. Whatever you want to do, be my guest. Bring in Nate Hackett, who's an awful offensive coordinator. Like, he didn't even try to make things work when Aaron Rodgers got hurt. We saw this team on its back, face down. No, sorry, not on its back. Face down, ass up. That's what the Jets were after Aaron Rodgers got hurt. I understand. You could bitch and you can moan all you want. The Jets, okay, I understand you're cursed. Yes, your quarterback got hurt 4 plays into the season, but you make the most of it. And they didn't. They didn't. And Rodgers, whether it was, made up or not, whether it was fact or fiction, Rodgers made that comeback in record time, probably to just placate his ego, but he did. And maybe if you went out and got a serviceable backup quarterback, I understand you didn't really have the assets to trade away, but you could have went out and signed Carson Wentz. You could have signed Joe Flacco. I mean, I think the biggest mistake the Jets made was signing Dalvin Cook, was wasting whatever they had left instead of beefing up the offensive line. What was the point of drafting Izzy Abanikanda out of Pitt, in the draft? Why? Why are you going to do that if you're going to bring in Dalvin Cook? I understand the two-headed snake, the two-headed monster of Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook, but you had him, you had Breece Hall, you had Michael Carter, you had some solid backup options on this team, and Izzy Abanikanda. You had guys to hold over, for what Breece Hall was going to be after an ACL injury. But instead they went out, they got enticed and fantasized by the prospect of Dalvin Cook, who has been one of the best running backs in the league. I didn't hate the signing at the time, but it made no sense. It made no sense when they needed to have, the backup options at offensive line. They needed the depth. It was the one big question mark. Everyone said it before the season. The Jets look like a championship contender besides their offensive line. What's Mekhi Becton? What's Joe Tippmann, who we just drafted? Like, who are these guys and what are they going to be for our team? And they weren't anything. They sucked. And they weren't as bad as the Giants' offensive line, but it showed. And Rodgers got lit up on that first drive. He blew out his Achilles because he was dealing with pressure. And that would have been the case the entire year. It was bound to happen. Something of that magnitude was bound to happen. All of his years in Green Bay, never had an offensive line that bad. And maybe he did earlier on in his career, but he was mobile. He's a 39-year-old, turning 40, and now you have to deal with this. This could be a cancer to your team, having Aaron Rodgers, wanting him to be this game-changing, difference-making quarterback like he was earlier in his career, but who knows what he's going to be after this Achilles injury. He's only going to be less mobile, so you really need to figure out the offensive line situation. If they do, yes, the Jets could compete for a Super Bowl, but that is the biggest question mark. You have the weapons on offense. You have the weapons on defense. They're one of the best defenses in the league, who has constantly been let down by the offense. A defense spends the most time in the league, or one of, I can pull up the stats, but, if you watch games, you understand the defense is on the field way more than the offense. And that's going to have to change. And you can't just look at Aaron Rodgers and be like, okay, well, he's going to be the difference maker. Throwing him in the game is going to change everything. I don't think so. I really don't know how effective Aaron Rodgers was going to be this year. It was unfortunate. No one was rooting for that injury. When it happened, I was in denial and shock that it actually happened. I'm not even a Jets fan. I do root for the Jets, and I wanted them to be great. I want great teams around New York besides the Nets. When that happened, I'm not even a Jets fan, and all my, hopes and dreams went up in smoke, along with every other Jets fan. All right, enough with the Jets talk. Let's get into something that Joe Schoen said to the media on Tuesday. Joe Schoen, GM of the Giants, spoke to the media from the Combine, from the NFL Combine. Giants, of course, have the 6th overall pick in the draft. I'm not going to talk about what they're going to do, the questions he was asked. He left everything open to speculation, which, he's a GM. He's going to speak like a GM. He's not going to reveal his hand. He's not going to reveal what's going to happen with Saquon Barkley. It is apparent. It is very clear that the Giants want to bring back Saquon Barkley, but at what cost? What is the price going to be? Will it be financially feasible for the Giants to make that deal? These questions remain unanswered. But here's a question that Joe Schoen answered about Brian Daboll. He basically like pushed back, and this is all stemming from the article that Pat Leonard wrote about the dissent between Daboll and his other coaches. Basically, Schoen pushed back on the idea that he was on the headset because of concerns, the report that, which ended up being true. He was on the headset for those 4 games. And he basically said like the reports of friction between Daboll and Wink Martindale were surfaced, on the morning of that Commanders game. That was the game that Joe Schoen took over. And he said basically that none of that happened. He said that there was no dissent, that he and Daboll have a great relationship. And he just decided on that day, he's like, hey, I really want to do it. I really want to, get on the headset. Weird timing. I think there could be some lying going on here. I don't think he would reveal if it was actually the case. I don't think he would confirm all these reports, but he basically said that he got on the headset and ended up continuing for those 4 games. They won the first game. They won the game against the Commanders. So he stayed on because I guess he thought it was good luck. He's a superstitious guy. I'm a superstitious guy. This is the only part that actually makes sense to me. The Giants won that game against the Commanders. So then he kept staying on the headset until they lost, resoundingly to the New Orleans Saints. That game that was really the make or break for the year when the Giants actually got to that point. I don't think anyone was expecting that. And then, of course, everything went to you-know-what after that. One other thing he said, and this is the most concrete comment that we have seen, the most concrete statement that we have seen regarding that original report about dissent. Joe Schoen said this: if some of those articles come from sources that have an agenda, maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's just, we all knew it was true. We knew where that information was coming from. Of course, it only made sense that it came from Wink Martindale and his camp, trying to, paint himself to be this upstanding coach. He wasn't trying to get in the middle of anything. He was just trying to do his job. Brian Daboll was abusive to the staff. Whatever. We knew that was from Wink Martindale. But I think that it's slightly telling that Joe Schoen had to say that the truth is somewhere in the middle. So maybe Brian Daboll this offseason and these reports are a wake-up call for him to start forging better relationships with his coaching staff. They brought back Kafka. They elevated him to associate head coach. He got his raise, or he got, promotion. He's still the offensive coordinator. He still calls the plays. But, that was a step in the right direction. And we'll see what happens between Daboll and Shane Bowen. I hope Shane Bowen isn't this guy who's just going to take from Brian Daboll all the time, because it's clear that Wink Martindale did. I can't see that. I want to see them have a good relationship. I want him to be able to put aside all these doubts that he's unable to work with other coaches, because I can't have the Giants be forced into another rebuild. They can't afford to start over yet again. And we saw positive steps with this regime. We saw the trash that they had to take out, the dead weight that they had to cut off that was left over from Dave Gettleman, who didn't make all bad decisions, but the majority of them were not good. So we saw that, and now I just want to see. I want to see things go smooth and steady. I'm not even asking for a playoff appearance. I'm asking for competence. I'm asking for a team that actually shows some improvement, a team that shows its defense, its takeaways were so good just because of Wink Martindale. I don't want to see that. I think I'm speaking for a lot of Giants fans in saying that this team and this organization is facing its most important year in a very long time. This, as I stated before, is completely make or break. You can't have distractions hanging over like this. But again, we don't know. We really have no idea. All of us Giants fans were excited and optimistic going into this year, and we saw how that all went down. One other thing is, it remains to be seen, and we'll discuss more as the weeks go on, is whether or not the Giants, A, draft a quarterback, B, trade up to draft that quarterback. And I think a lot of Giants fans are starting to, fall in line here and understand that maybe Daniel Jones isn't the guy going forward. That maybe the excuses have been too much, and maybe Joe Schoen should trust his gut if he likes one of those top 3 guys and give up what it takes to get one of those picks and draft one of those 3 quarterbacks. If the Giants draft J.J. McCarthy at 6th, this is Daniel Jones 2.0. And then it just repeats the life cycle of having to make excuses for a quarterback who isn't ready to win. And a quarterback who, let's just face it, is not of the stature, is not of the ability of these 3 guys, and Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels. So we're going to talk about that more. If you want any more Giants coverage, if you want any more my Giants takes, Giants talk, you can subscribe to the One Giant Step podcast from Odyssey. We release videos on the WFN YouTube page. I'm going to put a link down below. If you like my Giants talk, you're going to like that even more. It's consistent. It's one time a week, occasionally joined by Sean Morash. During the season, it's both of us every week. But as less news has come out, I've been doing more stuff on my own. So if you like it, subscribe to that. And if you like this channel, subscribe for more New York sports information. It's not always going to be the Giants every week. It could be more Knicks. Hopefully they start to put it together. They look terrible. Alec Burks is one of the worst basketball players I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes. We're going to get to that. Trust me. We talk Knicks. Yankee season coming up. I'm not too optimistic. I'm not as optimistic as a lot of other people are because of the obvious elephant in the room. Juan Soto has not been extended, and I can't get past that fact. I don't want him for a year. I want him forever. We're going to talk about that. Knicks. Whatever else you want. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you want. It was good talking with you all this week about the Giants. Again, subscribe to One Giant Step if you want more Giant stuff, and I will see you all next week.